Practice. The actual application or use of an idea, belief, or method opposed to theories relating to it. Whether we want to become better musicians, writers, videographers, speakers, meditators, or even just students at school, we're gonna need practice. And really, not just any kind of practice, but we actually need committed practice. And that is the topic of today's video. How do we practice in a way that is actually effective and actually gets us where we want to get to, all right? It achieves the desired result of the practice, all right? Because we're not practicing for anything, right? We're practicing for a specific outcome. And we want to increase our chances of actually getting to that outcome, right? That's where committed practice comes in. It's going to supercharge your practice, all right? Because actually, most people practice, right? Most people practice something in their life. But what most people are missing is the committed element. Most people don't commit to their practice, all right? So what is a committed practice, actually? Well, I came up with a definition that I think is pretty good. I think it gets to the very core of what the concept is about, and I'm going to share it with you now. It's quite a mouthful, so bear with me. A committed practice is a well-defined, purpose-driven, and systemic approach to getting good at something. All right, I'm going to repeat that. A well-defined, purpose-driven, and systemic approach to getting good at something. All right? Like I said, it's a big definition, so let's go over each element. As you saw, there's 3 elements to it. And so you can better understand the concept and really get some value out of it. All right? So let's start with the first part of the definition, which is a well-defined practice. What is a well-defined practice? All right? A well-defined practice is actually pretty simple. It's a practice in which you are aware of the area of focus. And your area of focus is simply, what is the practice aimed at? What are you trying to practice, right, in the first place? Now, this is more specific than just like, oh, I'm practicing filmmaking today, or I'm practicing writing today, or I'm practicing, I don't know, let's say tennis today. Okay? That's a very vague way of putting it. That's a very vague focus, all right? What you want to do with your practice is you want to get more specific. You want to actually hone in on some specific element or aspect of your craft that you want to practice, all right? Now, to do this, it's actually useful to break your craft down to its components. So, whatever your craft is, think about all the different components that make up your craft. And then choose an element, choose a component that you find that you need practice in, right? Maybe it's a weakness of yours. Maybe it's an aspect of your craft that if you actually were able to do better, it would actually improve the overall process a lot more, okay? So let's say I'm practicing speaking, okay? I'm practicing speaking, and instead of just saying, I'm going to practice speaking now, I choose a specific component to speaking, right? And that could be, all kinds of things, ranging from body language, voice tone, or maybe the sentences, the words that I use. But let's say I want to speak, I want to practice voice tone with my speaking. So I'll specifically dial in on that component, and I'll dedicate the practice session towards that component. What happens when you do this is your mind gets a lot more focused. Your mind gets this kind of tunnel vision, and basically makes it a lot easier for you to make progress in that area. And the next element, or the next aspect of a clearly defined practice, is the length. You simply want to know how long you're intending to practice for. And this is important simply because, again, if you have a set time frame and you've set that purposefully for only practicing whatever you've chosen to practice, then you're going to be much more likely to do it. Opposed to not having any kind of time frame, just saying, I'm going to practice this for a while now. What tends to happen is that your mind will get kind of complacent. You'll do a bit of the practice and then you'll get sidetracked by something else, and you'll basically stop the practice way too soon. All right, so you want to set a timer for yourself, maybe for 1 hour, maybe 2 hours, or whatever time frame is good for you, and you want to dedicate and commit to it fully. All right, this is an aspect of committed practice. You want to be very clearly defined with your practice. All right, that's the first element to the definition. The second element is purpose-driven. And purpose-driven simply means that you are aware of the bigger picture of your practice. Why are you practicing? Why are you trying to get good at whatever it is you're trying to get good at? What's the reason behind it? What's the higher reason? Right? You might think, oh, that's not necessary. But it is. It's very important, simply because if you want to make progress in some area, you need to have a bigger reason to do it. Something that's bigger than yourself. Because ultimately, whatever it is you're trying to get good at, if your goal is to master it, then you're going to need massive amounts of motivation to sustain that practice for in the long run. All right, because if you're trying to get good at, let's say music, that's a big thing. I mean, it's gonna take a long time for you to get good at that, and it's gonna take a lot of work and a lot of energy. And if you don't have a higher vision for why you want to do that, then what tends to happen is you're gonna lose motivation. And when you don't have that motivation, you don't have that drive that's sustained, that's fueled by the higher vision, then you're gonna quit. And you're gonna quit so soon that you're barely gonna get results out of your work. And the third and final element to the definition of a committed practice is the systemic element. Your practice needs to be systemic. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that you need to create a self-correcting feedback mechanism into your practice. All right? Sounds weird? Well, it's actually very simple, right? A self-correcting feedback mechanism simply means that you have a system, you have created a system into your routine which allows you to cultivate information that you can then use to improve your craft as you go along. What could be an example of this? Because it might be a bit hard for you to grasp. Well, let's imagine that I have decided to get fit. I want to go to the gym. I want to get more fit. I want to start building muscle. I want to get good at weightlifting. Not only do I want to start weightlifting, but I actually want to get good at it. So what I could do is I could go to the gym and I could get a membership and then just start going there and hope that I'm doing everything correctly. Hope that I'm, lifting the weights properly and I'm not hurting myself and I'm, hitting all the right muscle groups and whatnot. That's one way of doing it. But that's not a very strategic method because I haven't created a self-correcting feedback mechanism for myself. What if I decided to hire a personal trainer instead? Now that starts to be a bit more strategic, because if I really want to master this, if I'm really serious about mastering weightlifting, then I want to find some system that can correct my practice as I go along, that can keep correcting my craft, and so that I can make progressive exponential improvement. So what a personal trainer could do there in this case is I'm lifting weights and doing deadlifts or whatever. The personal trainer is simply there and is giving me feedback, is giving me information about my practice that I can then use to correct it if necessary, right? So they might give me some feedback on my form, or the food that I'm eating, or whatever, the consistency, the reps, whatever it is that I'm doing. They'll give me feedback on it, and I can then use that feedback, use that information to correct the process so that it's more aligned with the outcome that I desire. All right? It's very important to set yourself a self-correcting feedback mechanism into your practice. Now, it might be tricky for you to implement this, but let's take another example so you get a better grasp. Because it's not only about hiring a coach. That's only one possible way to do it, okay? Let's say you want to be a filmmaker, all right? Let's say I'm learning to become a filmmaker and I want to improve my films. I want to get better. I want to make better movies, okay? I could hire a filmmaking coach or a mentor or whatever. That's one way of doing it. And certainly that would help. But let's say I don't have enough experience or enough money to do that yet. What I could then do is I could go out and make some movies, make some short films, make some kind of, finish some kind of project, and then look at that past project and then ask myself maybe a series of questions. Maybe I could actually ask myself the question like, what one thing could I do better? What's the one thing that I could improve? What's the one thing that I could change in my work that would make it that much more better? That would make it that much more, that would improve the quality of the overall product, right? When I ask myself that question, then I'm gonna get to the very core. I'm gonna get to the very core of what it is that I need to do. What's the next step I need to make in order to advance with my practice, right? And if I make that a regular thing, if I make that a thing that I ask that question, let's say once a month for myself, every time I finish a project, I ask myself that question. That's my system. That's my feedback mechanism. Then what's going to happen is I'm going to make a lot more progress than I would otherwise. Okay? That information, that insight that I will get from answering that question of what could I do to make things better, that's going to serve me with my practice. All right? And ultimately, that's going to be a much more strategic and effective approach to getting good at filmmaking or whatever it is that I'm getting good at. All right, so that's the video. As a recap, here are the 3 elements that you want to make sure your practice consists of, all right? Well-defined. That means you know your area of focus and your length for the practice. Then you want to have a purpose-driven practice, which means you simply know the bigger picture, the higher vision to why you're doing the practice. And third, you want to have a systematic approach. And that simply means you want to create a self-correcting feedback mechanism, as we just talked about. All right, if you get those things right and you actually work on whatever craft you're working on with those 3 elements in mind, and you really apply them, then I can assure you that you're going to get a lot more results than you would have otherwise with your work. All right? And that's the whole video. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.